Having just beaten Alan Wake, it feels rather odd writing a script about it, and I guess now reading that script out loud. I had gone into the game completely blind. I had played a bit of Control when that came out, but it was really all I was familiar with firsthand of Remedy's games. So here's the short of it. I like Alan Wake. I really like it. It's not perfect, but its status as a classic is well deserved. It's a game with surprising depth past its gameplay, which is good because when the game falls short, it's in its gameplay. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, this is by no means a comprehensive analysis of the game. I'm a normal guy who played a video game, and these are my thoughts about it. Basically, a lot of what I will be talking about is subjective. That means you may not agree with me, but that's okay. Let me know what you guys think about the game in the comments below. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into it. Alan Wake is an action horror game. I put horror in quotations as despite a pretty spooky story with lots of mind-bendiness, the gameplay itself isn't really that scary. You're actually introduced to the gameplay before the narrative in a pretty catching dream sequence. From there, you're able to come to terms with the combat basics before getting lost in the narrative. I actually really like this approach, as it allows you to see if you like the gameplay right off the bat. A lot of modern games recently like to obfuscate the gameplay with a ton of narrative up front, which honestly would have worked with this game because of the compelling story, but it's refreshing to start a game and immediately know how to play it before making the commitment to the story. So what is the core gameplay loop? Well, to me, and hear me out on this, it's pretty similar to Halo CE on Legendary. See, when playing Halo CE on Legendary, the weapon sandbox shrinks to weapons that are viable to kill. And so a lot of things are thrown out. That leaves you with about 4 weapons, though one of them you always need to have on you, the plasma pistol. While the Magnum, Sniper, and Shotgun are what you would otherwise have in your other slot to deal with grunts, jackals, the Flood, or hunters, they are worthless against elites on Legendary. That's where the plasma pistol, or rifle if you're really desperate, comes in. It is the best weapon to strip shields before swapping to one of the other 3 to finish off the elite. What does this have to do with Alan Wake, you might be asking? Was this just an excuse to capture more Halo footage? Well, it definitely was an excuse to capture Halo footage. I'll take any excuse I can get. But the connection to Alan Wake is immense to me. The flashlight is the plasma pistol, and every enemy basically has a shield. So you have to shine, for example, the flashlight on the enemy to break the shield before you can shoot them. This is explored to greater depth than what Halo does, though the connection was strengthened for me when the only available weapons other than the flashlight in Alan Wake were a powerful handgun, a shotgun, and a rifle. You can even say the flare gun's like a rocket launcher, but I digress. Some enemies only need to be hit with the flashlight to die, like the crows, which, come to think of it, are also like the Sentinels. Plasma pistol gets them. But unlike Halo, where you are cozy and safe in your ton of armor and also have shields like the enemy, Alan Wake is just an out-of-shape dude with questionable mental stability, meaning you are very vulnerable. You really can't afford to be hit, not because it does a ton of damage, but because it staggers you. Every second staggered is a second not shining the flashlight or running to a checkpoint. Your goal is not the elimination of an enemy in engagements. It's merely to end the engagement. While oftentimes this does just result in badass Alan gunning down hordes of Taken, which Bungie definitely ripped off for Destiny, so I guess who inspired who here, sometimes your best option is just to run or find an alternative way to get out of the situation. It's an interesting gameplay loop, but it does get a bit repetitive towards the end. By episode 3's end, you've pretty much encountered every enemy type, so the rest of the combat is just shuffling around enemies you've already fought. This would be fine if, like in Halo, there was a bunch of extremely unique enemies that operate differently, but the enemies in Alan Wake consist of possessed people holding different things, possessed objects, Alan's terrible physical inability to run or jump worth a damn, and birds. Oh, right, and that goop that's on the ground sometimes. So gameplay is what I would categorize as good and serviceable, but I'm not exactly itching to play more of it in particular. So let's talk about what made me want to see this game through, though. The excellently crafted world and narrative. The game starts off with a tutorial, as mentioned, but the story's pretty light there. It's after that where the plot kicks in. You play as the titular Alan Wake, a famous author, as he and his wife Alice go on a retreat of sorts. Alan has been in a writing funk for the past couple of years, unable to write anything, so he and Alice head to Bright Falls to get away from the expectations and stress of being a published author, and to also probably get away from the hustle and bustle of New York City, their home. You spend a small amount of time in the town meeting some of the locals before Alan and his wife head to their cabin. It's here that Alice springs a typewriter on Alan in the hopes that he might be able to write something with a new change of scenery. Well, this backfires. It actually pisses him off, so he leaves the cabin to cool down. But as he's outside, something in the cabin snatches her away and pulls her into the nearby lake. This essentially puts Alan on his quest to find his wife and save her, and this is also where my summary ends. I know it's a pretty brief summary of things, but I do believe that if you haven't played this game, then you should before watching the rest of this video. If you have played this game, though, join me as I give my thoughts on the story in a little more detail. This won't be a summary, though, so if you get lost or you don't understand the context, go play the game. Alright, so there's no particular order for what's about to happen next. I'm just shooting off some thoughts I have about the game. First of all, I love the premise of the manuscript. The pages that describe what is about to happen or what is happening in other places is such a narrative twist. Most stories don't want to spoil themselves, they just want to keep the audience engaged by telling things chronologically. The reason Alan Wake spoiling itself actually works, though, is because the spoiler comes in the form of a different medium. You read it, and then that makes you excited to see how it's going to play out in the game. It's like when your favorite book gets a good movie or show adaptation. Yeah, you know how the story goes, but it'll be fun to see. I also really like how the pages are rolled out to you. I thought at the beginning that they were just a fun side collectible, until I noticed that the pages started to come true. Shortly thereafter, Alan in the game also starts to realize the manuscript pages are coming true, and upon that revelation, it becomes one of the main factors of the plot. It really just subverted my expectations when a mechanic I thought was frivolous became core. It made me really excited to see every page as I found it, as it wasn't only a cool bit of story, but sometimes a gameplay edge that helped me prepare for an ambush or puzzle. In a similar vein, I loved how the two special episodes took what I initially assumed was an artistic mechanic by flashing your flashlight on words to make them real in the final episode, but they turned it into a part of the sandbox for puzzles and combat. I think the Taken and the Dark Presence are also good antagonists, as you understand enough of their motive to know that they are bad, but beyond that, they are kind of a mystery. I like this because a lot of game franchises lose their charm once the mystery is fully solved. This story leaves me thinking about its multiple mysteries and hypothesizing them in my head, and that's a good thing. I do find that this game suffers from what a lot of games from that generation suffer from, and that is making the love interest very generic. Her character breaks down to this: she's pretty, she likes photography, she loves Alan, and she hates the dark. Alan constantly refers to her as his muse, but then he doesn't seem to have any deeper or impactful memories for other than petty fights between them, and her just saying cringy generic things like, "Honey, come back to bed." God, that killed me. It just seems as if a thought-driven guy like Alan were to have memories, they would be about the connections that he and Alice made and the deeper reasons for why he loves her. She could be a compassionate, caring person, but that depth is lost with silly one-liners, being Alan's inspiring memories and the reason he wants to make it out alive. Overall, though, the worst that happens when these moments came up for me was me chuckling out of cringe and moving on. The game poses so many interesting questions that I want the answers to that Alan's wife being poorly written was a non-concern while playing. The next thing I want to bring up about the story is its ability to provide anyone with a suspension of disbelief. See, I am the worst person to enjoy a story with because I think I am a very logical person, so I constantly point out plot holes or flaws that I find to be ridiculous. And at first I was that way with Alan Wake, oft thinking, who would just leave a gun out here or ammo there? But once you realize Alan wrote everything to happen the way it did, it makes a lot more sense. The plot armor is literally plot armor by the rules of the world. If anything seemed too good to be true, I was able to tell myself, though sometimes Alan himself told me, that it was because Alan wrote it. Finally, I want to talk about Alan. He is extremely well written. In the events of the original story, he's an extremely driven person who wants to do the right thing typically, though can be a jerk at times. He shows a range of emotions, from sorrowful to angry to jubilant. However, he pretty typically plays things straight. When he reads the manuscripts, for example, he reads with confidence in his tone. In the first 5 episodes, the only emotion he doesn't really portray is fear, although he does allude to it in the dialogue at times. This confident nature melts away, though, in the 2 special episodes as Alan Actors reads things with genuine sounding fear and terror. This is the closest to horror the game comes, and it is really good stuff. The concept of hearing yourself describe your death with a tone of sheer panic and despair is nightmarish, and it's nightmare well portrayed in this game. I honestly could go on about all of the interesting things in this game for hours, like the Night Springs episodes that were a treat to find and watch. But I think I've gotten most of my most pressing thoughts onto the page here. What do you guys think of Alan Wake? I think it's definitely a new favorite of mine in terms of story, and I definitely think it's a classic. I'll also be looking at potentially some other games related to it here real soon. But I'd love to hear what you guys think about the game, and if your opinions line up with mine, or if they're different. Regardless, thank you all for watching. Goodbye, and have a happy Halloween.